The first time Elvis Presley ever saw the world was on a cold January night in 1935, in a tiny two-room shotgun shack in Tupelo, Mississippi. The shack was so small that the entire family, Elvis's parents, Vernon and Gladys, and his twin brother, Jesse Garon, who was stillborn, lived in one room. The other room was a kitchen, and a place to store what little they owned. Tupelo, a town where the poor were poorer and the rich were just a little less poor, was a place where life was hard and hope was a luxury. It was a town where the soil was as tough as the people who worked it, where the only thing that grew easily was cotton. The town sat in the northeastern corner of Mississippi, halfway between Memphis and Birmingham, where the rich, fertile soil of the Midwestern prairie met the harsh, brick-colored soil of the southeast. Old Town and mud creeks cut through the town, and dozens of smaller streams veined the rolling countryside, many of them bearing the names of the Native American tribes who once called this land home. The Indians had brought seed corn and taught the settlers how to farm, but by the time Elvis was born, the town was a shadow of its former self, worn down by the Great Depression and the relentless toil of sharecropping. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, was a man who had known hard times. He worked as a truck driver, a cotton picker, and whatever else he could find to put food on the table. Gladys, Elvis's mother, was a woman of few words but a strong heart. She was the one who held the family together, her love for her son unwavering from the moment he was born. Elvis's birth was a moment of joy in a town where joy was a rare commodity. But it was also a moment of deep sorrow, for his twin brother, Jesse Garon, was stillborn. The loss of Jesse cast a shadow over the family, but it also made Elvis the center of his parents' world. From the very beginning, he was their hope, their dream, and their reason to keep going. In those early days, Elvis's world was small. It was the two-room shack, the dirt roads, and the fields where his father worked. But even as a child, there was something different about him. He had a voice that could make people stop and listen, a smile that could light up the darkest room, and a presence that made everyone feel a little bit better just by being around him. Tupelo was a town where dreams were often crushed, but for Elvis, it was the beginning of a journey that would change the world. In a place where the future seemed as bleak as the soil, Elvis Presley was a glimmer of hope, a boy who would one day become a legend. Mrs. Fay Harris was Gladys Presley's closest friend in East Tupelo. They lived in a small house on Adams Street, right across from my Assembly of God church. The house often flooded, with water rising so high that furniture would sit in muddy water. Fay and Gladys were inseparable. There wasn't one thing I knowed Gladys didn't know it too, and the other way around, Fay said. Vernon, Gladys's husband, used to joke about it. He'd say, "I got something to tell you, Glad, but you'll have to go tell your buddy down the street, won't you?" Gladys came from a big family with 5 sisters and 3 brothers. She was the 5th girl. Her parents farmed, and she grew up in a house on Berry Street, just a few blocks away from Fay. Gladys didn't meet a stranger, Fay remembered. She could talk to anyone and always had a big laugh. When things got dull, we'd go see Gladys to cheer up. Vernon, on the other hand, was a bit more distant. He lived a little farther away but was still close. He had 1 brother, Vester, and 3 sisters. After you got to know him, he was friendly, but at first he was a little more distant to folks, Fay said. Vernon and Gladys met through friends and started dating. They'd go to the roller rink in town, or have picnics at the fish hatchery. They didn't go together too long until they got married, Fay recalled. They sure were a handsome couple, him so blonde, and her so dark, and both of them happy as kids on the day school lets out. Vernon was only 17 when they got married, so he lied about his age, saying he was 22. Gladys, who was 21, said she was 19. They borrowed $3 for the fee and got married in Verona, a small town nearby. A few years later, Gladys's younger sister Cletties married Vernon's brother Vester. In 1933, Vernon worked on a nearby farm, hoeing cotton and corn for a share of the profits. Gladys worked as a sewing machine operator at the Tupelo Garment Company in Milltown. She worked long hours from 6 in the morning to 6 at night, sometimes even on Saturdays. Fay worked there too, and they both earned about $13 a week, if they were lucky. When Gladys found out she was pregnant in the summer of 1934, she had to quit her job because the pregnancy was hard on her. Vernon was working as a milk truck driver, delivering milk door to door. He asked his boss, Orville S. Bean, to help him build a house. Orville agreed and financed the house, which Vernon and Gladys rented from him. The house was small, like many others in the neighborhood. It was a shotgun-style house, long and narrow, with a small covered porch. Inside there was a brick fireplace with a chimney running up the middle. The house was divided into 2 square rooms. The front room was the bedroom, where there was an iron bedstead and a lumpy mattress. The back room was the kitchen and dining area, where they entertained friends and family. There was no running water, so they had to use an outdoor pump and outhouse. The house sat on higher ground, which helped during floods, but the area behind it was severely eroded, and mud often slid under the house during heavy rains. In January 1935, the county was in the middle of tough times. Schools might have to close early due to a lack of funds, and a cannery that had just opened would have to shut down, leaving 160 people jobless. Despite the hard times, Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8th. Gladys had always said she was going to have twins, but the doctor didn't believe her. After Elvis was born, Gladys told the doctor she was still in labor. A neighbor finally convinced the doctor, and a second baby, Jesse Garon, was born stillborn. Jesse was buried in an unmarked grave in the Priceville Cemetery. Elvis became an only child and was spoiled as much as the family's budget allowed. Gladys thought he was the greatest thing that ever happened, Faye said. She worshipped that child from the day he was born to the day she died. She'd always keep him at home, or when she let him play, she'd always be checking on him. Wherever she went, she always had Elvis with her. She wouldn't go anywhere without him. Gladys also taught Elvis about manners and respect. One time Elvis found a Coca-Cola bottle on Faye's porch and took it home. Gladys spanked him and sent him back with the bottle. "Miss Harris, I done wrong and my mama whipped me for it. So here's your Coca-Cola bottle back," Elvis said. Faye gave him the bottle back and some cookies. Elvis told Gladys, "Mother, I told you she didn't care if I took it." Gladys replied, "But you didn't ask her first." Gladys's love and strict teachings shaped Elvis's early years. He was always under her watchful eye, and she made sure he learned the importance of respect and kindness. Despite the hard times, the Presleys made the best of what they had, and Elvis grew up feeling loved and protected. Mrs. Presley often talked about how she tried to teach Elvis and his friends to be kind and happy, not to fight. She said that sometimes a bully would come along, and then Elvis's daddy would show the bully how to stand up for himself. She said Elvis usually won the fights. Elvis's parents also taught him manners, like saying sir and ma'am, standing when an elder entered the room, and not interrupting or arguing. They taught him that if he didn't have anything nice to say, he shouldn't say anything at all. Elvis took these lessons to heart, and even when he became famous, he continued to call people Mr. or Mrs., and to say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. Elvis loved his parents deeply. His mom and dad told stories about how worried he got when his father did dangerous things, like swimming in a lake or rushing into a burning building to help save furniture. Elvis was always afraid of losing his dad, and he cried a lot when these things happened. One of the most difficult times for the Presley family was in 1938, when Vernon, Elvis's dad, and his uncle went to prison for forging a check. The family lost their home, and Vernon was only released after 8 months because the man he had wronged asked for his release. This incident had a big impact on Elvis's life. Elvis's early memories were tied to an Assembly of God church in Tupelo, which was just a block and a half from their home. It was there that he first heard music. When he was a little boy, he would slide off his mom's lap during church, run down the aisle and try to sing with the choir, even though he didn't know the words. As he grew older, he and his parents would sing together at church events, but they were always part of the congregation, never performing as a trio or in the choir. The Assemblies of God churches were part of the evangelical movement that spread through the South and Midwest during the 1920s and 1930s. They believed in a strict interpretation of the Bible, with strong messages about the consequences of sin. The services were emotional, with the pastor often speaking in tongues and delivering powerful sermons that filled the small church with a mix of fear and hope. Elvis later said that he learned his performance style from the preachers at these church services. He saw how the audience responded to the preachers who jumped around and moved in all directions, and he tried to capture that energy in his own music. Elvis wasn't a handsome boy when he was little. Early photos show a chubby face with large, heavy-lidded eyes, a twisted nose, and drooping lips. As he grew, his features became more pronounced, but he still had a unique, lopsided smile that would become famous. When Elvis was 5, his mom started walking him to school. She continued to do this, even when he was older and in high school. The school had all 12 grades, and by the time Elvis was in 4th grade, there were 700 students and 26 teachers. One of Elvis's teachers, Mrs. Olta Grimes, remembered him as a sweet and average student. One day during chapel, Elvis volunteered to say a prayer and sing a song. He sang Old Shep, a song about a boy and his dog, and it was so moving that the principal, Mr. J.D. Cole, entered Elvis in a talent contest at the Mississippi-Alabama Fair. Elvis sang Old Shep at the fair, standing on a chair to reach the microphone, and won second prize a $5 bill and free rides on the amusement rides. Elvis's dad worked many different jobs to support the family. He delivered milk, worked on crops, sorted lumber, and did carpentry. Despite the hard times, the family always had food, even if it wasn't the most nutritious. They relied on vegetables and sometimes dried or canned fruits, and meat was a luxury they couldn't always afford. Tupelo faced many challenges during the 1930s and 1940s. The weather was unpredictable, and the area often flooded. In 1936, a deadly tornado hit Tupelo, killing over 200 people and destroying hundreds of homes. The Presleys watched as roofs were torn off and walls were warped, but they were fortunate to escape major damage. When a tornado warning came, Elvis and his mom would rush to a storm shelter cut into a hillside. One day, while waiting in the shelter, Elvis's mom asked him if he wanted a guitar instead of a bicycle. The guitar cost $12.95, and Elvis agreed to it, promising not to ask for a bicycle for a year. With help from his uncles, Elvis taught himself to play the guitar and started listening to the radio, trying to copy the sounds he heard. Elvis loved spending time with his friends, and they would often gather at one house to talk, listen to the radio, and entertain themselves. In the spring, they would go to the woods behind his house to roll down hills and gather wildflowers. Elvis's friends would also come to his house to listen to him play guitar and sing. Elvis's style of music was slowly forming, influenced by the country music he heard on the radio, the blues from Mississippi, and the spirituals he learned at church. His early experiences in Tupelo laid the foundation for the legend he would become. Elvis's early years in Memphis were tough. The family moved into a one-room apartment on Poplar Avenue, which was far from ideal. The place was crowded, dirty, and had no kitchen. They shared a bathroom with 3 other families, and the electrical wiring was dangerous. Despite the poor conditions, Vernon and Gladys did their best to make it a home. Elvis, who was just a shy, polite boy from a small Mississippi town, found it hard to fit in. His first day at L.C. Humes High School was overwhelming. The school had over 1,600 students, which was more people than the entire town of East Tupelo. Elvis's shyness made it difficult for him to make friends. He was often overlooked by his teachers and classmates. His music teacher, Elsie Marmon, remembered him as a quiet student who didn't show much promise in singing. But things started to change when the Presleys moved into a better apartment at the Lauderdale Courts, a federally funded housing project. The Lauderdale Courts were a step up from their previous home. The Presleys moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a kitchen and a private bathroom. The rent was adjusted based on their income, and they paid $35 a month. The neighborhood was still tough, with poor housing and a mix of races, but it was a significant improvement. Vernon continued to work at the United Paint Company, earning about $35 a week, while Gladys took on occasional jobs. Elvis's parents continued to treat him like a young child, even though he was growing up. His mother, Gladys, walked him to school until he was 15, and she doted on him constantly. Despite the challenges, Elvis found a few close friends, like Buzzy Forbes and Red West. Buzzy and Elvis were practically inseparable, and they spent a lot of time together, often playing football and getting into scrapes. Elvis's hair and clothes made him stand out. He had long hair and sideburns, and he wore bright, colorful outfits that were different from what the other boys wore. His style was a mix of truck driver and country musician, and it gave him a unique look. He played football for 1 year, but his appearance and style often got him into trouble. The coach eventually told him to cut his hair or quit the team. Music was Elvis's true passion, but he was shy about performing in front of others. He would play guitar and sing for his friends, but he was hesitant to perform in public. His biology teacher, Buzzy Forbes, remembered a Christmas party where Elvis was too scared to sing and left his guitar behind on purpose. Despite his shyness, Elvis's love for music never wavered. One day, a history teacher named Mildred Scrivener noticed Elvis's talent and encouraged him to perform in the school's variety show. This was a turning point for Elvis. He started to gain confidence and began to embrace his unique style and personality. The variety show was his first step toward becoming the performer he was meant to be. Life in Memphis was tough, but it was during these years that Elvis began to find his identity. He developed a sense of personal security and started to build the confidence that would eventually make him a star. Despite the challenges, Elvis's passion for music and his close friendships helped him through the tough times. Elvis's senior year at Humes High School was a turning point. Miss Scrivener, his homeroom teacher, noticed something special about him. One day during a class picnic, a classmate suggested Elvis bring his guitar. Elvis, usually shy and quiet, sat by himself and started playing and singing. The music drew a small crowd, and soon more and more students gathered around, drawn by his soulful voice. The school's annual variety show was a big deal, and Elvis was on the program. The auditorium was packed with 1,600 students, all eager to see their classmates perform. Miss Scrivener, who was the producer, had to manage over 30 acts. She decided that only the act with the most applause would get an encore. When Elvis finished his performance, the audience was so moved that he was the one chosen for the encore. He came off stage, his face beaming with joy, and said, "They really liked me, Miss Scrivener. They really liked me." Elvis's friend, Buzzy, played a small part in Elvis's early performances. Buzzy let Elvis wear his red flannel shirt for the show, and Elvis dedicated a song to him, likely to make amends for a small tear in the shirt. Buzzy and Elvis also performed together at the Memphis Veterans Hospital, where Elvis played the guitar and sang while Buzzy danced. After school, Elvis took on various jobs to help his family. He worked as an usher at Lowell State Theater, but he had to quit because it was affecting his studies. Later, he worked at the Marl Metal Products Company, where he would often fall asleep in class due to the long hours. His mother, Gladys, eventually took a job as a nurse's aide to help with the family's finances. Despite their financial struggles, Elvis's parents did their best to provide for him. They even bought him a used Lincoln coupe, which he would sometimes share with his father. One summer night, Elvis added some gas to the car for his dad, but he was so excited that he embarrassed himself in front of the neighbors. Elvis and Buzzy were close friends, and the Presleys often treated Buzzy like family. When Buzzy hurt his arm playing basketball, Mrs. Presley was so worried that she almost cried. On weekends, the Presleys would go to the movies, leaving Elvis and Buzzy to have their own parties at home. Elvis would play his guitar and sing, and Buzzy and their friends would dance. Elvis was also becoming more confident with girls. He dated often, and the girls he went out with really cared for him. He was a good dancer and knew how to make a party fun. One time, they were short on money for a hayride, so Elvis announced at a record store that they were having a hayride and needed more people to join. Soon they had enough money and a truck full of friends. In school, Elvis excelled in shop and rock. He made a cutting board and a salad bowl for his mother, and even spent $900 on uniforms for the school's rock drill team after he started making money from his music. Despite his talents, he wasn't voted as the most popular or most talented in his class. He was just one of the guys, and that was okay with him. The Presleys faced more financial troubles, and they were evicted from their home in the projects. They moved to a smaller apartment on Cypress Street, which was closer to the city center. Elvis graduated from Humes High School in June 1953, and soon started looking for work. That summer, Elvis met Dixie Locke, a girl 3 years younger than him, at the Assembly of God Church. Dixie was struck by how different Elvis was from other boys. They became inseparable, going to church, babysitting, and double dating with their friends. Elvis shared his dreams with Dixie, telling her that he wanted to be a singer more than anything. They even talked about running away to get married. Elvis found a job at the Crown Electric Company, where he helped with deliveries and stock. He made enough money to help his family and enjoy his time with Dixie. His life was changing, and he was starting to believe that his dreams could come true. Elvis's job at Crown Electric was a good one. The company was just a short walk from his apartment on Cypress Street, which was only a block from their original Memphis home and 3 blocks from the Lauderdale courts. This meant Elvis could easily keep in touch with his friends. He usually walked to work, checking in around 8 in the morning. The owners, James and Gladys Tipler, remembered when Elvis first came to them. Gladys Tipler recalled, "We called Tennessee unemployment, and the lady said she had a nice boy, but his hair was long. When Elvis walked in, I wasn't sure what to think. His hair was really long, even though he looked clean-cut. I might have told him to leave if the lady hadn't warned me." James Tipler added, "Elvis loved his hair. He'd always comb it back after a run in the truck. He was always making sure it looked just right." Elvis was the youngest employee at Crown, and sometimes the older electricians would play jokes on him. One day, Elvis came in and told Gladys he needed sky hooks. They searched the warehouse for what seemed like forever until James came in and laughed, saying, "You don't put hooks in the sky." Another time, Elvis blew a tire on the truck but kept driving. Gladys told him, "Elvis, put down that guitar. It's going to be the ruination of you. You better make up your mind what you're going to do." Elvis just laughed. The truck Elvis drove was a Ford pickup with a carry-back for equipment. Sometimes, on his way to pick up or deliver supplies, he would pass the Memphis Recording Service, a small recording studio run by Sam Phillips. Elvis knew about the service and how you could make your own record for $4. When he had the money, he parked the truck nearby during his lunch break and went in. Marion Kasker, the office manager, was there that day. "It was a busy Saturday afternoon," she said. The office was full of people wanting to make personal records. Elvis came in and sat down with his guitar. We had a conversation. He said he was a singer, and I asked, "What kind of singer are you?" He said, "I sing all kinds." I asked, "Who do you sound like?" He said, "I don't sound like nobody." I thought, oh, one of those, but he seemed sincere. Elvis wanted to make a record of My Happiness, and That's When Your Heartaches Begin, as a gift for his mother. Marion remembered, when we went back to make the record, he got about halfway through the first side, and I thought, I want to tape this. I found a crumpled piece of tape and started recording. I missed part of the first song but got the second one. Marion had a reason for taping Elvis. She knew Sam Phillips was looking for something special. Sam had grown up on his father's Alabama plantation, where he heard the blues from Uncle Silas Payne. In Memphis, Sam recorded many blues artists and sold their songs to record companies in Chicago. He believed the blues had a unique freshness that other music lacked. Marion said, "Sam often said, if I could find a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel, I could make $1 billion. I heard that in Elvis, so I taped it and wanted Sam to hear." When Sam returned, Marion played the tape for him. Sam was impressed but thought Elvis needed more work. He asked for Elvis's name and address. Marion had written down, "Elvis Presley sick. Good ballad singer, hold." Months passed, and Elvis visited the Memphis recording service again. This time, Sam was there. Elvis asked if Marion had mentioned him. Sam said yes, and told Elvis he liked the tape, but couldn't do anything right away. Elvis asked to make another $4 record. Sam agreed, and Elvis recorded, "I'll Never Stand in Your Way," and "It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You." During his lunch breaks at Crown, Elvis often ran past a local radio station, WMPS, to watch the live broadcast of the High Noon Roundup. The show featured country artists and gospel groups. The host, Bob Neal, would later become Elvis's manager. Elvis almost joined a gospel quartet called the Songfellows. The leader, James Blackwood, said, "Elvis auditioned and was going to join us, but another boy decided to stay. Elvis was disappointed but still sang with us during rehearsals. He moved his hips in a way that wasn't typical for gospel, but it was just enthusiasm." Marion Kasker kept pushing for Elvis. "Every time a song came up, I'd say to Sam, 'What about the kid with the sideburns? Sam would say, "I'm not sure he's ready yet." This little game went on for months. One day, Sam received a demo record he liked. It was a simple, lovely ballad called "Without You." Sam tried to find the singer but couldn't. Marion suggested, "What about the kid with the sideburns?" Sam agreed to give Elvis a chance. Marion called Elvis and he ran to the studio. Sam played the demo for Elvis, but Elvis couldn't do it. He tried again and again, but it didn't work. Sam asked, "What can you do?" Elvis said, "I can do anything." He played snippets of different songs, religious, gospel, western, and even Dean Martin. Sam saw potential and asked if Elvis was looking for a band. Elvis said yes, and Sam said he might be able to help. Sam called Scotty Moore, a young guitar player. Scotty had a band called the Starlight Wranglers, and they often backed up different artists. Scotty remembered, "We were playing honky-tonks around town. Sam and I became close. He was looking for someone willing to work, so we donated the band. Sam put out a record on us, but it didn't sell much." Scotty and Sam discussed what they could do. Finally, Sam mentioned Elvis's name. Scotty was intrigued and agreed to help. This was the start of something big. Sam told Scotty about this kid named Elvis, who he thought had potential. Scotty was all for it and said, "Call him, let's get him in and work with him." But Sam was a bit hesitant. He thought it might be too much pressure for Elvis and suggested Scotty call him instead. Maybe set up a meeting for the weekend. Scotty agreed and called Elvis one Saturday night. Elvis was at a movie, but his mom got him, and they made plans to meet at Scotty's house the next day. When Elvis showed up, he was wearing pink slacks, a pink shirt, and white buck shoes. Scotty and Elvis started playing their guitars, and Elvis sang some popular songs by Eddie Arnold, Hank Snow, and Billy Eckstine. Bill Black, a bass player who lived nearby, dropped in and listened for a bit before leaving. When Elvis was gone, Scotty asked Bill what he thought. Bill wasn't too impressed, saying Elvis was just a snotty-nosed kid with wild clothes. Scotty called Sam and told him the same thing, but Sam still wanted to give Elvis a chance. He decided to set up an audition for the next day, with just Scotty, Bill, and Elvis. The audition turned into several months of hard work. Every day after their jobs, Scotty, Bill, and Elvis would meet at the Sun Studio to rehearse. Sam would listen while doing other things, telling them to keep it simple. They were trying to develop a unique style, something that blended country and blues. One night, Elvis started playing "That's All Right, Mama," and Sam came running out of the control room, excited. They recorded it right then and there. The next song they recorded was "Blue Moon of Kentucky." It came about the same way, with Bill clowning around and Elvis joining in. These two songs were the first record. They combined the sounds of white country and black blues to create what would later be called rockabilly. Sam took the record to Dewey Phillips, a disc jockey who played black blues music on his radio show. Dewey liked it and played it on his show. Elvis was so nervous that night, he went to a movie. His parents found him in the theater, and Dewey had already played the record. People were calling in excited. Dewey played it again and again, and even interviewed Elvis on the air. It was a bit of a surprise for Elvis, who didn't realize the interview had already started. Within a few days, there were 5,000 orders for the record. But for Elvis, life didn't change much at first. He still went to work at Crown Electric and started playing at local nightclubs. One of his first gigs was at the Eagle's Nest, a ballroom where he sang with Malcolm Yelvington's band and later with Jack Clement's band. He was paid $10 a night. Scotty and Bill were part of a band called the Starlight Wranglers, and there was some jealousy when Elvis started getting attention. They played a few shows together, but the audience reaction was mixed. However, when Elvis, Scotty, and Bill played at the Katz family's drugstore, the teenagers went wild. The Starlight Wranglers eventually broke up, and Elvis, Scotty, and Bill decided to split their earnings. "That's All Right, Mama" became a hit in Memphis, reaching the top of the charts. It even got some attention in Nashville and New Orleans, but it wasn't a big national hit. Sam had to work hard to get the record played on the radio. He sent copies to disc jockeys, but many of them didn't like it. Some said Elvis was too country. Others said he was too black. On July 31st, Elvis performed at the Overton Park Shell in Memphis. The union wouldn't let him perform because he wasn't a member, but the audience raised money to get him on stage. He sang, "I'll Never Let You Go, Little Darling," and the crowd loved it. Dewey Phillips, who was there, told Elvis to sing "Good Rockin' Tonight" that night, and the place went wild. The success of the record helped Elvis get booked on the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. Sam arranged it, and they all drove to Nashville for the show. For everyone, the Grand Ole Opry was the ultimate goal. It was a big deal, and they were excited to be there. Elvis Presley's journey in the music world was anything but smooth from the start. His first big break came when he stepped onto the stage of the Grand Ole Opry in 1954. The Opry, a legendary country music show, had a special place in the hearts of aspiring country musicians. It had been broadcast from various venues, from small theaters to large auditoriums, and the Ryman Auditorium, known as the Carnegie Hall of Country Music, was where Elvis found himself on that memorable day. Elvis, accompanied by his manager Marion Kasker, arrived at the Ryman, only to be disappointed by its worn-out appearance. He couldn't believe that this was the place he had dreamed of performing at for years. The building, built in 1892, hadn't been painted in ages, and it looked far from the grand stage he had imagined. Despite his initial shock, Elvis was determined to give his best performance. When it was his turn to go on stage, Hank Snow, a popular country singer, introduced Elvis, but the introduction was a bit awkward. Hank didn't even remember Elvis's name, and had to ask him again. Elvis, with his characteristic politeness, repeated his name, and then he stepped forward to sing "That's All Right, Mama" and "Blue Moon of Kentucky." Unfortunately, the performance didn't go as well as Elvis and Marion had hoped. After the show, Jim Denny, the Opry's talent manager, told Elvis that he should consider going back to driving a truck. This devastating comment broke Elvis's heart, and he was so upset that they left a suitcase full of his clothes at a gas station on their way out of town. Despite the setback, Elvis's spirit remained unbroken. Years later, when Jim Denny tried to make amends, Elvis's response showed his true character, a gentleman who always treated others with respect, even those who had once hurt him. But the Opry's rejection didn't stop Elvis. The next big opportunity came when he was invited to perform on the Louisiana Hayride, a popular country music show in Shreveport, Louisiana. And like the Opry, the Hayride welcomed Elvis with open arms. The show's announcer, Frank Page, introduced Elvis with enthusiasm, and the audience was captivated by his unique style and energy. Elvis's performance was a hit, and he was soon given a year-long contract to appear on the show every week. Elvis's popularity on the Hayride grew, and he became a regular attraction, even performing commercial jingles for the show's sponsors. The Hayride's audience loved him, and the venue was always packed when Elvis was on the bill. Despite his growing fame, Elvis remained grounded and humble, always showing respect and gratitude for the opportunities he was given. As his career began to take off, Elvis faced new challenges. He quit his job at Crown Electric to focus on music full-time, and he and his bandmates, Scotty Moore and Bill Black, hit the road, performing at small venues and traveling long distances for gigs. The early days were tough, with minimal pay and long hours on the road, but their dedication and passion kept them going. In 1954, Elvis signed his first management contract with Scotty Moore, who had been more than just a guitar player. Scotty had been a supportive friend and helped Elvis find gigs and build his reputation. However, as Elvis's fame grew, Scotty realized he needed a manager who could handle the increasing demands of the music industry. That's when Bob Neal, a local disc jockey and friend, stepped in. Bob Neal became Elvis's manager in January 1955, and their partnership was like a family affair. Bob and his wife Helen treated Elvis like a son, and they worked hard to book more gigs and promote his music. Elvis's second record, featuring Good Rockin' Tonight and I Don't Care If the Sun Don't Shine, earned him recognition in the industry, but it didn't sell as well as his first. Despite this, Elvis's unique blend of country, rhythm and blues, and pop was gaining attention, and he was starting to be seen as a new kind of artist. Elvis's journey was just beginning, and the road ahead was filled with both challenges and triumphs. But one thing was clear: Elvis Presley was here to stay, and he was about to change the face of music forever.